Good evening. It's 8 o'clock. It's the sixth day of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and tragic news. Just 21. An Indian student dies today in Russian shelling in Kharkiv. 21-year-old Naveen from Karnataka was killed as the Russians stepped up their bombings of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. His roommate tells NDTV he had just gone to buy groceries. Naveen's video call with his family just a day ago. The Prime Minister speaks to his family, calls an urgent meeting which is currently on evacuations. On day 6, Russia escalates its bombings on the two major cities of Kiev and Kharkiv in Ukraine. Civilian casualties too. These satellite images show a 64-kilometer-long Russian convoy just outside the capital, Kiev. An Indian advisory to students says, leave Kiev urgently today. Students say, how do we leave? Civilians are bearing the brunt of bombings as deaths rise. India abstains again from a UN vote, this time a human rights vote against Russia. China, in fact, changes its stand. They vote for Russia, in support of Russia at the UN. The vote on the Russian human rights violations is passed, but 13 nations, India, Pakistan and others abstain.
Perpetrated and unprovoked and unjust.
A standing ovation for the Ukrainian President Zelensky at Europe's Parliament. Prove you are with Ukraine, he tells the EU. The next round of Russia-Ukraine talks to be held tomorrow. And images of heroism emerging from Ukraine. A man takes on a Russian tank. Our lead story tonight, well, the tragic news that a young Indian student has been killed in shelling in Ukraine's second biggest city, Kharkiv. This came on a day that the Ukrainian president gave a strong speech to the European Parliament saying we want to be equal members of the European Union, that Russia's Vladimir Putin has killed 16 children yesterday and many more civilian casualties. Meanwhile, heavy fighting is expected in the capital, Kiev. A 64-kilometer-long Russian military convoy has been seen in satellite images just outside Kiev. Russia today at the UN meet said Russian response was needed as Ukraine was trying to get nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, India abstains again in the third UN vote, this time at the UN Human Rights against Russia, calls for talks between both sides. But let's just look on day 6 of the invasion how Russia has escalated bombings and targeting residential and civilian areas in Kharkiv, the second largest Ukrainian city. So there you have it, these shots of these bombings, and Indian student, 21-year-old Naveen, killed today in shelling. Let's go across to Jyoti Hire, who's reporting for NDTV from Ukraine's capital, Kiev. Jyoti, we've seen an advisory from the Indian embassy telling all Indian students to get out of Kiev today urgently. But they're asking, how do they actually leave? What's the situation in Kiev today? We know that it's been put under military control by the president of a general. What's happening currently?
Right, so I'm in the Kiev Central train station. You can see behind me, there is not an inch to move here. There are thousands of people in the train station trying to get out because this is the only way you can get out of Kiev right now. So for the students that need to get out, this is where.
Right, the Jyoti, I can see obviously the connectivity is bad, but just let's look at these visuals of the bombings, the explosions, the shelling of both Kiev and Kharkiv and what it's like for civilians currently living there. Jyoti, if you can just show us, as you were talking about the fact there's not an inch of space, how often are trains actually running to get people out of those cities?
You know, there's this green board behind me which has a whole list, but that list is just not true anymore. They're coming, it's sporadic. You see a train show up maybe every hour, 2 hours. There's no schedule left anymore. It's basically, these announcements, the people here are just waiting to hear one of these announcements to rush out doors. But there are also hundreds of people already on the platforms. It's -1 right now, just standing there with their kids waiting. So the people that are inside right now, for them to get out and get a train right now, it's probably going to be until evening nightfall. So At this point, it's first come, whoever gets there first gets on the train.
We've had the very tragic news today of an Indian student being killed in shelling in Kharkiv. Now, the Indian embassy has asked all Indian students to leave Kiev. How is it possible to do that? Are you seeing any movement possible for Indian students to leave Kiev as we speak?
They can only come to a train station and catch a train. Right now, the city is surrounded. So any other way to get out of here by a private vehicle is not possible right now. So students need to come to the train station quickly as possible if they're not already here, and wait for the train in the station. That's the only way right now. I mean, there's fighting all around Kiev, all the perimeter. It's not in the center yet, but the only chance right now to get out is here, or the alternative is to head straight down into a bomb shelter.
So Jyoti, I can imagine how difficult it is for you as well there, and stay safe. I think that's really the main focus for everybody, for you, for students, for civilians. But today the Ukrainian president, in a very powerful speech, talked of the casualties we are seeing. He said 16 children have died. He said civilians are being targeted, residential buildings are being shelled. What is it like for someone in the city of Kiev right now, especially with reports that Russian convoy now just miles away from Kiev?
This situation has just dramatically spiraled out of control within 5 days. From 5 days ago, where there was an explosion, an attack in the middle of the night between 2 and 4 a.m. to now just constant explosions all over the city. There have been residential buildings hit by missiles in the city. Nowhere is safe unless you're underground in a bomb shelter.
Jyoti, as I said, stay safe. I can understand the anger. Ukrainians are now saying that the world is watching what's happening, asking for NATO to intervene in some way, but stay safe. We hope the talks come to some kind of breakthrough. But thank you very much for joining us with those live updates from the station as we speak. And the story for India, which everyone's watching, is the fate of the thousands of students who are still trapped in there. 4 ministers have left today for various neighboring borders. But the tragic news came in today of a 21-year-old Indian student, Naveen, dying in Russian shelling. He was a 4th-year student of the Kharkiv National Medical University and was out to buy groceries.
This is Russian shelling in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, today. Amid this devastation, a young Indian student, Naveen Shekharappa, out to buy groceries, killed in Russian shelling. Naveen, just 21, was a 4th-year medical student at Kharkiv's National Medical University. Just 2 days ago, his worried family from North Karnataka talked to him on this video call, urging him to be safe, but to get out of Kharkiv as fast as he could.
ಎರಡು ದೇಶದ ಜೊತೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಮಿನಿಸ್ಟರು, ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಯಾವುದು ತೊಂದರೆ ಕೊಡಬಾರ್ದು ಅಂತ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಫ್ಲಾಗ್ ಹಿಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ನೀವು ಸಾಮಾನು ತಗೊಂಡು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಇನಿಷಿಯೇಟ್ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ ನೋಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಫಸ್ಟು. ಬಂಬಾರಿ ಟೈಮ್ನಾಗ ಮೂವ್ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ ಏನೋ, ಅದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸಿಚುವೇಶನ್ ನೋಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಯಾವಾಗ ಶಾಂತ ಆಗುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ಆ ಟೈಮ್ನಾಗ ನೀವು ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮೂವ್ ಮಾಡ್ರಿ. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಒಂದು 50 ಕಿಲೋಮೀಟರ್ ನೀವು ಮುಂದೆ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನೀವೇ ತೊಂದರೆ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ವೆಹಿಕಲ್ ಸಿಗ್ತವೆ, ಟ್ರೈನು, ಬಸ್ಸು.
His death has escalated the urgency of the Indian government's efforts. Under fire from the opposition and families of students still stuck in Ukraine, the Prime Minister spoke to Naveen's father, as did the Chief Minister. The Prime Minister met for the 4th time with his senior officials, and both the Russian and Ukrainian envoys are likely to be summoned to guarantee safe passage to Indian students stranded in Kiev and Kharkiv, where Russian shelling has intensified.
Prime Minister has already spoken, and we will do our best to recover the body and bring it back to India.
On the ground, desperate students are calling for help as the Indian government issued an advisory saying leave Kiev urgently today. The reality is students have no way to leave.
I'm Bismaya Wilson, medical student from Kharkiv. We are about 160 Indian students stranded in the underground metro station for the last 4 days with limited food supplies. Like us, there are hundreds of other students in each of the 20 different metro stations in Kharkiv. Food and water are running out, but we have strict instruction that not to go outside due to the unsafe condition. The situation is getting worse as each day passes. The metro is getting crowded day by day. By today, our food and water would be completely exhausted.
Another video from a third-year student of Taras Shevchenko National University stranded at Kyiv railway station. She's speaking in the video and showing how Indians are racing against the curfew time, not being allowed inside the train. They're still stranded, now trying to get on buses.
These are all Indians standing here, and the only people who are allowed to go in are Ukrainians. We are all Indians standing here. We came right from that place. They told us to go to the first bookie, and now they are not letting us in.
Parents of Naveen are devastated, though the Indian officials are still in touch to understand when the mortal remains will arrive to India and to Haveri district of Karnataka. All that the parents right now at the moment ask is, when will Naveen's mortal remains reach? In Bengaluru, Shrija for NDTV.
And a similar situation for hundreds of parents and families across India who are doing video calls with their young children who are begging for help in any possible way. NDTV spoke to Shrikant, who was Naveen's roommate studying at that same university, on what actually happened.
When I woke up, I messaged him that, where are you? He said me that I am near Etibe. You can transfer me some of funds because I have shortage of funds so that I can bring more stuff. So I transferred him money, but after that, after 10 minutes, we heard bombings and missiles everywhere. I called him, I tried to call him, but he was not able to pick up. I was trying so much time. After half an hour, when I was trying, someone received the call from these Ukrainians, and they were saying something, and I was not able to understand it. Then I gave that phone to one of a neighbor who was staying in this shelter with us. They said the lady was speaking, and while speaking, she started to cry. I asked her with a scarcity, what happened? What is in afraid? I asked one of them. They said he is no more.
What a traumatic time for those students and the families. Our sincere condolences to Naveen's family. Meanwhile, this is the time that Russia is doing its big push towards Ukraine's capital, Kiev, and the civilian devastation and deaths are rising. This as Russia and Ukraine are scheduled to hold a fresh round of talks tomorrow. Ukraine's president, meanwhile, is appealing to the European Union and the world to help.
Russia's big push towards Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. A 64-kilometer-long military convoy. These images also show burning factories and homes along the route of the convoy, backing the Ukrainian assertion that Russian forces are targeting civilian areas as well. Overnight, Russian missile strikes at Kyiv, according to the Ukrainian government. And today, Ukraine's defense ministry tweeted this video, reportedly showing its aircraft bombing a Russian convoy. Ukraine says 352 civilians, including 14 children, have been killed in Russia's offensive so far. Ukraine officials also put out this video of multiple explosions in Kharkiv, the second largest city, to counter Russia's claim that it wasn't targeting residential areas. This dramatic video appears to capture the moment when a Russian missile airstrike smashes into the city council building. Footage of the aftermath shows debris scattered on the road after the explosion. The number of injuries or casualties is still unknown.
Пятые сутки мы находимся здесь в подвале, очень сильно переживаем, очень сильно страшно. С нами находятся маленькие дети, с нами находятся пожилые люди. Ну, собственно говоря, очень страшно.
Putin wants Ukraine to be demilitarized and what he calls denazified, as well as Europe's recognition of Russia's annexation of Crimea. That's unacceptable to Ukraine and the European Union. For now, the war on the ground and on social media for global public opinion continues between the two sides. Bureau Report, NDTV.
And Ukraine's president addressed virtually a special session of the European Parliament where he told them, prove that you are with us, and talked of the rising casualties of Ukrainian people, including that of children.
This morning, 2 cruise missiles hit this Freedom Square, dozens of killed ones. We have a desire to see our children alive, but we are fighting also to be equal members of Europe. I believe that today we are showing everybody that's exactly what we are. The European Union is going to be much stronger with us, so that's for sure.
And today, the Ukrainian envoy in India also appealed that all world leaders, including the Prime Minister, come out in support and condemn President Putin's actions, saying that what's happening in Ukraine by Russia is like the massacre by the Mughals against the Rajputs.
If we are making some small comparison, you see, it's like the massacre arranged by Mughals against Rajputs, or like massacre which was arranged by Nadir Shah against innocent people of Delhi.
And India, along with 12 other countries, including Pakistan, has abstained from voting against Russia in a human rights resolution against Russia. China, in fact, also changed its stand and came out in support of Russia. However, the vote against Russia passed with a majority.
India has abstained from a vote against Russia for the 3rd time since it invaded Ukraine. The latest abstention came at the United Nations Human Rights Council, which is to consider a resolution on the alleged human rights violations because of the invasion that, according to the United Nations, has killed over 100 civilians, including 7 children. The vote was passed as 29 of 47 members voted in favor. India was among 13 who abstained. The others, including Pakistan, UAE, Kazakhstan, Somalia, Sudan, Armenia. The Russian foreign minister spoke at the conference, hitting out at the West and demanding what he called a fair balance.
Превосходства, исключительности и вседозволенности философии Запада должен быть положен конец. Суверенное равенство государств – ключевой принцип Устава ООН, и он в полной мере распространяется на работу Совета по правам человека. Россия всегда открыта к равноправной, взаимоуважительной дискуссии по любым вопросам.
There were 5 votes against the resolution, which included Russia, China, Eritrea, Cuba and Venezuela. At the end of the Special United Nations General Assembly, where 193 member states have been called upon for a rare emergency meeting, there will be another vote on a resolution against Russia, similar to the US-led draft Security Council resolution. However, India has made it clear that its time-tested strategy is for diplomacy.
India is deeply concerned that the situation in Ukraine continues to deteriorate. We reiterate our call for immediate cessation of violence and an end to hostilities. All member states of the United Nations are not only obliged to follow the UN Charter, but also respect international law and territorial integrity and sovereignty of states.
There has been growing pressure from the West and Ukraine on India to speak out against Russian aggression, especially given close ties between the two.
Russia, a member of this council, perpetrated an unprovoked and unjustified attack on Ukraine. It was an attack not only on Ukraine, it was an attack on every UN member state, on the United Nations, and on the principles that this organization was created to defend.
The 3 votes against Russia all carried despite the abstentions from India and others. The next vote will be the largest, with all 193 United Nations members set to vote and no veto allowed. Sneha Koshi for NDTV.
And Putin's war continues to impact markets. The European markets have declined over 2% today. Hardest hit is the Russian ruble, which has fallen over 2%. Oil prices are rising as well. The Brent trading at $104 a barrel. Bitcoin, meanwhile, has jumped 13% as the United States imposes more sanctions on Russia. Meanwhile, returning to the tragic news of the death of 21-year-old Naveen from Karnataka, killed in shelling by Russia in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. His father spoke today and said that he wants the mortal remains of his son back as soon as possible. He also said for those who were attacking Indian students in Ukraine, saying that they couldn't get through in colleges here, that he had scored 90% in his exams.
Your media informed to our senior officials, embassy, Prime Minister to bring back my son's dead body. Okay. And also I request to all these political leaders, kindly look into the matter and see that donation is very bad, and all these intelligent students, they are going to study in abroad. They think that education here, if they plan to get that education here, they have to pay crores to get that seat. And the same education, better than this, they are getting very good education in abroad, and all this practical equipment also very standard. Here in India, only that caste-wise, they are allotting the seat. Because my son has got 97% in the PUC.
Okay, thank you, sir.
He said his son got 97%, and this came also just hours after a controversial statement by a minister who said that 90% of the students who come back from Ukraine fail in their qualifying exams to be doctors here.
That is not the question, it is not the time to debate. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬಂದಂಥವ್ರು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ದೇಶದಿಂದ ಬಂದಂಥವ್ರು ನಮ್ಮ ಕ್ವಾಲಿಫೈಯಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮಿನೇಷನ್ 90% ಪಾಸ್ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಐ ಆಮ್ ನಾಟ್ ಟೆಲಿಂಗ್ ದಟ್ ಇದು ಯಾವುದು ನಾನು ವಿವಾದ ಅಥವಾ ಚರ್ಚೆಗೆ ನಾನು ಹೋಗ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಬಯಸೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಒಳ್ಳೇದಾಗಲಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ನಾನು ಹೇಳೋದು. ಆದರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿನ ಕಾಸ್ಟು ಇಲ್ಲಿನ ಕಾಸ್ಟು ಅದು ಈ ಕಂಪೇರ್ ಮಾಡೋ ಟೈಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲ.
Well, moving to other news, Microsoft has today said that Zen Nadella, the son of CEO Satya and his wife Anu, has died. Zen was just 26 years old and had been born with cerebral palsy. The software maker told his executive staff in an email that Zen had passed away and asked executives to hold family in their thoughts and prayers while giving them space to grieve privately. Even in the midst of such devastation in Ukraine, you're seeing stories of everyday heroism. And here's these images, which is really of a Ukrainian man stopping a Russian tank with his bare hands in the streets of northern Ukraine.